is Revolution. And we are getting closer and closer to me having my original setup back. And I'm very excited about that. So now for the first time in like a month, I'm actually speaking on my microphone. So I'm very excited about it. Anyway, enough about me. Today's episode is taken from our discussion that we got to have with Seattle City Councilmember Kshama Sawant. I feel like when AOC got elected, what was that, in 2018, a lot of what we see with Sawant is what I think people wanted to see with AOC. There is a huge difference in a city council seat and congressional seat, obviously. But this was an interesting interview. This is someone we've been trying to get a hold of for a while, and Saturday show crew member Karthik made it happen. So shout out to Karthik. This is Revolution family is not just Pascal and myself. It's a very large family. And Karthik is part of that family. You know who else is part of that family that doesn't get enough love? Moderator John Ross. You guys can't see the work he does when you're listening to this show, but generally you don't hear us complaining about the chat, and that has a lot to do with the fact that Moderator John is in there regulating. So shout out to John, shout out to Karthik, shout out to John. But I'm not going to take a lot of time. If you want to watch these live, then first things first, you need to subscribe to the YouTube. It doesn't cost you a dime to click the bell. YouTube.com/This is Revolution Podcast. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we do a live stream with a special guest, generally with a special guest. Very rarely will you get just Pascal and myself or one of the foreign policy Thursday cats. But this past Saturday, we had damn near a full, I said we had a full house because Karthik was there. We had Green Party Vice Presidential candidate Angela Walker, also part of the This is Revolution family. She's part of the Saturday crew. We had Marcus from the Left Flank Vets, part of the family. The homie Karthik came in. And of course, Pascal with the questions. And we had to go an hour early, so, you know, it was a late coming for a lot of people, but it was still a great show. So I wanted to put out just our part with council member, we kept calling her Congresswoman, Council Member Sawant. If you want to hear the rest of the show, there's one of two ways you can do it. If you want to see it, it's easy. Go to YouTube, you can see it. If you want to hear it, well, you want to hear the second half, you got to be a patron. It's easy. And you get all the bonus features. You get all the extra content. You get movie night. We're about to do another movie night. I'm very excited about movie night. Also, we're getting some new series together. I'm actually getting some, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm recording this on May 24th. I'm about to get some text from Pascal that I'm going to be putting together some footage for our first video essay series. We're doing a video essay series for Zero Books, but we're also going to be doing some stuff on our own. And I think I'm going to release it for patrons first, just to see how you guys like it. But some things went down in Haiti with Joe Biden extending TPS. And as you know, Pascal Robert is of Haitian descent and has a lot to say about not just this current administration, but administrations past and their dealings with Haiti. So we're going to do a quick little video essay. We're going to do a quick little video essay on Haiti. I'll be doing that all day, all night. And hopefully that'll be up this week. So if you are a patron, this is the kind of stuff you get when you are a patron. Also, people always ask us about merchandise. So finally, we got some merchandise. So this is REVOLUTIONpodcast.com. Also has links to wherever you want to hear the show. From the audio podcast, YouTube, to all our social media if you want to interact with us and email us, message us. And also we have the merchandise, hoodies, crew necks, t-shirts, men's and women's cuts, snapbacks. We got it all. And apparently it comes in like 3 days. So on that note, I'm going to hush. Here is our discussion with Seattle City Council member, Socialist Seattle City Council member, Kshama Sawant. I am out. Welcome. Happy Saturday morning, everyone. I'm just going to hurry up and get into it. Let me bring in my co-host, my homie, my dog. You know him as the greatest question asker in all of Miami-Dade County, Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings, brother Jason. Peace and greetings to the audience in the chat.
And pretty soon we won't be able to give him crap about being the only black guy in Maine as he's getting out of Dodge. So for the last Saturday, the only black guy in Maine, Marcus from the Left Flank Vets.
How you doing? And I'll be in Maine probably through the summer. It's just that the block that I live on now is getting gentrified immediately, you know, so eventually by the end of the summer I'll be out. and the black population will be down to 0 in Maine.
back to normal.
Build back better.
Business as usual. And coming all the way live from Seattle, Washington, our very special guest that we're all excited to speak to. She is doing some amazing work out there. Every time I see this woman, she is always doing something. She's always looking fierce. Kshama Sawant.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Congresswoman, Councilwoman, aspirational. Using that physiology was aspirational, but I want to tell you how much we appreciate. We've been trying to get you on the show for a while, only because we've been admirers on your constant presence on media sources explaining your position. So I want to applaud you for your position as, I believe, the first socialist on the City Council in Seattle. But I understand you're going through a major battle right now with some rather reactionary forces in the municipality, the state Supreme Court, and so on and so forth. Can you elaborate for our audience, what exactly are you facing as an oppositional force that is trying to recall your place on the City Council? What is the nature of this conflict, and why exactly is this particular motivation being put forth to try to have you recalled?
As you correctly said, Pascal, there is a recall campaign right now against my office. And you were also absolutely right that this is being led by really unsavory reactionary elements, not only the right-wing element in Seattle, which is anti-homeless, anti-poor, anti-people of color, anti-worker, but also big business. In fact, many of the prominent donors to the recall campaign are not only some of the biggest CEOs in general, but specifically many of the real estate barons, which is not surprising because if you look at the recall campaign, through the lens of what we have accomplished through my Socialist Council office in the 7.5 years that we've been in office, you will see that this recall campaign is a retaliation against the amazing progressive policies that we have been able to achieve, not because I'm someone extraordinary and certainly not because the Democrats on the City Council were in agreement with our progressive policies and we just, made some nice insider discussions and everybody was in harmony and we were able to achieve those. No, the way we won any of the victories we have won, and I'll talk about that in a second, has been because we turned our office into an organ of social struggle, of building movements, of workers, renters, marginalized communities. And on that basis, we have won the Amazon tax last year to tax big businesses like Amazon to fund affordable social housing and the Green New Deal projects. In 2014, 6 months after I was elected, we made Seattle the first major city to have won the $15 minimum wage. And in the interim, we have won renters' rights that were thought of as impossible. So, coming back to my starting point, it's no surprise that many of the CEOs and rich people who are funding this recall campaign are real estate companies who, for example, just to give you one example, Goodman Real Estate is a nearly $3 billion real estate corporation with real estate holdings in the United States and Canada, and it is the most evicting landlord in Seattle. So in other words, what this is, recall is an attempt to have a do-over of the re-election that we won in 2019, despite all the onslaught of big business money and the opposition of the Democratic establishment. And that is why the left nationally and even internationally has a stake in defeating this recall.
So what exactly is the nature of the charge? Because even the more traditional media sources are trying to allege that you've conceded to a certain degree of responsibility to the charges of the recall that were put forth by the Supreme Court. Do you want to clarify that for our audience particularly? Because there seems to be a serious type of effort to paint this as something you've already even admitted to.
Yes. So there are 3 charges in the recall campaign. It's important to note that 2 of the 3 charges are directly related to the involvement of my office and the solidarity that we have had, the unwavering solidarity that we have had with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it is quite stunning, the hypocrisy of the Supreme Court, that only months ago they threw out a recall that was petitioned by ordinary people, and I joined that petition even in terms of really urging the Supreme Court to recall the corporate Democratic mayor Jenny Durkin of this city, who between herself and the Democratic establishment and the police department and other bureaucrats in this city unleashed tear gas, rubber bullets, and other so-called crowd control weapons against peaceful protesters during the summer of protests last year. And yet the Supreme Court threw that recall out. And now, in this stunning kind of turn of events, they have slapped one of the recall charges against me for having led a peaceful 1-hour masked rally inside City Hall of Black Lives Matter protesters. And it was such a moving evening that we had in City Hall, where the protesters were in tears saying to me, this is the first time I have felt welcome in the City Hall, the first time I felt like this belongs to the public. And the recall is, the Supreme Court has approved this recall. So it really shows you how, if you examine each of the charges, it shows you how this is retaliation against a socialist council office that has unambiguously fought for working people. It's so in other words, retaliation against working class representatives who dare to go against the establishment grain. But it is also, if you look at the fact that 2 of the charges are related to Black Lives Matter, it's also an attempt to chill protest, and it is really trying to criminalize protest. And the third charge, and this is another thing you refer to, is a charge that somehow I violated an ethics rule for not being able to use my city council resources for a ballot initiative. But in reality, we didn't do that. In my view, the rules were sort of altered as we went. And I'm no lawyer, so I cannot speak definitively about the ethics code. Unfortunately, the Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission ruled on this matter, and I'm in no position to dispute their code. I can clearly say, however, that, and as the settlement agreement that we carried out itself does, that my understanding of the rules regarding ballot initiative was that I was allowed to use the resources of my office prior to an initiative being filed. Certainly, I would never, and I have never willfully disregarded any ethics rules. So I signed that settlement, which the media are reporting to now, and absolutely will apply that interpretation of the ethics code going forward. And rather than battle further on that question, I would far rather prioritize the fight to win rent control and other workers' rights. But I can say one thing unequivocally: I do plead guilty to fighting unapologetically to tax Amazon and big business. I plead guilty to spending much of the year 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, fighting alongside hundreds of other activists to make Jeff Bezos fund affordable housing. And you should see what an incredible victory this is. The Amazon tax represents, over the next decade, a $2 billion transfer of wealth from Seattle's richest people to ordinary working people and the poor, not to mention the Black community, because Black and Brown community members are disproportionately affected by the affordable housing crisis in all of our cities. And this is a historic victory, not only for the Tax Amazon movement, it is a historic victory for the Black Lives Matter movement.
And I want to say, Pascal is right. We have been trying to get you for the last couple months, actually. And it was with the help of one of our sometimes co-hosts that he was able to reach out and get you on the show. So let me bring him in. He's here now. Karthik.
Hey guys, how's everyone?
We're good, man. We're good, man. And also in the house tonight too, she's actually handling something, and she's going to be here just really shortly. Is Green Party Vice Presidential candidate Angela Walker is here as well. Also very excited to speak with you as well, Councilwoman.
Well, Kshama, I want to get beyond the details of the recall, which I completely agree with you was in an attempt to neutralize. What I'm really interested in more so is with your strong advocacy and left socialist position. I'd really like to talk to you about the broader left project in American politics and what exactly you see are the obstacles in this particular moment where we have a neoliberal administration of Biden, and we're still faced with the residue of a reactionary right-wing Trumpist force in the American political scene. What exactly are the obstacles and limitations that stopped putting social democracy or socialism on the actual table as an alternative to these two forces? If you can give us a brief explanation as to what exactly do you see as the obstacles of the new burgeoning socialist left from addressing the materialist needs of a population that is desperate for that politics?
I think that's a very important sort of, it's the question of the hour really for the left. How do we build urgently in order to provide a viable alternative to the millions of people who are completely and correctly disenchanted by what's on offer typically, which is corporate politics? And certainly the Republicans and the Democrats have a real, some differences. And of course, it was crucial that American voters delivered a repudiating defeat to Trump in the last election, showing that America is not turning reactionary. If you look at the vast majority of working people, they're actually looking for a progressive alternative to the Wall Street dominated politics in Congress and the White House. But also, the other question that stares us in the face is that of the impending climate catastrophe. So as you were alluding to, Trump may have been defeated, but Trumpism is not dead. So it's so urgent that the left build itself. And as far as, what is stopping us from doing that, carrying that project out, as you mentioned, obstacles, I think obviously, this has to be a longer conversation. And I really appreciate being able to discuss with you all this morning. But I think if you look at the sort of the principal aspects of what we need to build the left, it is the clarity in leadership. And when I say leadership, please know that I of course, I mean elected representatives, and that has to be a big part of our conversation. But it's also the leadership, unelected leadership in social movements, the leaders in the labor movement. So the leadership on the left as a whole has a real responsibility to present an analysis and a strategy and, of course, tactics in specific movements that will actually help the left, meaning workers, marginalized communities, and so on, win concrete victories, and also at the same time provide a vision for a different kind of society. I mean, we know that capitalism is not going to solve the problem of climate change. Capitalism will not end racism and other oppressions. As Malcolm X said, you can't have capitalism without racism. So in all honesty, we have to provide a vision for a different kind of society, in my view, a socialist society. But how do we do that? We have to do that by actually mobilizing and organizing and empowering millions of ordinary people. This is, we cannot. One of the obstacles is having this idea that, on the one hand, it's going to be superstars. And so, we ascribe superpowers to some individuals and don't understand that it is actually about empowering and organizing the rank and file of the movement. And on the other hand, we also see the left leaders, many leaders on the left, including in DSA and in the labor movement, making excuses for those same leaders, like, oh, you can't expect them to be superhuman, you can't expect them to do the right thing all the time. So I think we have to get out of this stranglehold of either some superstars will do everything versus, oh, well, they can't do everything. You cannot put these accountability demands on them. We have to get out of that kind of stranglehold and understand that what we need is leadership that two things. One, provides a fighting strategy and understands that there is no change that comes without conflict. And you have to embrace, not just accept it, embrace that conflict. Be proud of the fact that we are engaging in a class struggle, because that is how the struggle is posed under capitalism. We didn't make it happen. That is how it is. And secondly, to empower rank and file. And that is how we have won the victories that we have won in Seattle.
Well, if I can ask a question, right now we seem to be like completely entrapped, as Pascal pointed out. We seem to be trapped in this like reactionary sort of framework because we exclusively rely on like seem to be relying on Congress, the United States Congress, to be passing legislation and so on. And you seem to be showing even in a city council that like you can achieve so much. So could the path forward be to transform, like, say, a state such as Washington State into a socialist state? And could that be a path forward for the left?
I think this hits upon a very common and important debate to clarify on the left, which is this idea of local politics versus larger politics, national and international politics. And absolutely, we as in the left, has to take the advantage wherever we can in terms of winning victories, whatever level it might be. So as you correctly said, Karthik, we didn't let the fact that this was a city council victory stop us in any way. We have done both, which is fight for and win concrete victories at the local level, which actually is transformative for the material lives, the living standards of ordinary people. When we won the $15 minimum wage, that was a serious transformation in people's lives. That was by no means enough, but it provided that actual change in people's lives, as have all the renters' rights we have won. But at the same time, what we did was help people understand, and we are continuing to do that, which is that winning these reforms will not be enough. We really have to set our sights at systemic change. So we have to do that no matter what level of leadership or position or what we win. We are absolutely undying and unwavering obligation has to do that every single day. Never take an easy day off. If as an elected leader you're having an easy day off, then you're letting people down, the people that you claim to fight for. So we have to take that responsibility extremely seriously. At the same time, I would say that often the debates on the left, as certainly in the overall sort of progressive scene, are presented, in my view, as a false dichotomy of local versus national. On the one hand, people will say, well, you should start local. You cannot be bold in Congress. It's understandable if AOC did not force the vote, or the squad did not push for $15 an hour to be included in the stimulus bill. That's understandable. That's harder, but you should do it at local level. But then when you come to the local level, you will see that you face the same obstacles. And this goes to Pascal's question about obstacles too. I mean, it is a pipe dream for the left if we end up thinking that, the obstacles are in Congress, but they aren't in the local level. So in other words, that's a false dichotomy. In reality, it doesn't matter what level you are at, or whether you're talking about a legislative body or the labor movement, you win a seat as a labor leader, or as unelected leaders in social movements like Black Lives Matter. Doesn't matter where you go. There is no way of avoiding the almighty conflict with the ruling class. In Seattle, the victories that we have won not because Seattle is a small city and it's not Congress. We have won because we have correctly understood we are going up against not only big business, but the Democratic Party establishment of this city, which absolutely controls the city. And we have made it impossible for them to not reckon with socialist politics. And the way we have done that is by turning outward and building the power of ordinary people to win victory. So when we won $15 an hour, or rather when I took office and we had run our campaign pledging to win $15 an hour, at that time I was only one yes vote on the $15 measure. So as you said, Karthik, we cannot see this through a lens of, let's do legislative policy making. That's not where it's at. Where it's at is the fight back. And you build a fight back, and there's a potential of winning. So we turned that 1 out of 9 yes votes, into 9 yes votes not by winning the hearts and minds of corporate politicians and even progressive Democrats, but by making it impossible for them to vote no on 15 without paying a hefty political price. So our job is to create that political price wherever we go and reject the false dichotomy between local versus Congress. No matter where you go, we will have to fight back. And I will say, just in this context, it is important to point out what just happened. In Congress, there was this important vote on a measure that included $1.9 billion, for the Capitol Police and Capitol Security after they failed to secure the building during the January 6th, takeover by the right wing. and which was extremely dangerous. But look at what the squad did. Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, and Ayanna Pressley all voted to take the measure down correctly. But then Ocasio-Cortez, Bowman, and Tlaib of Michigan just voted present. And it shows you that at the end of the day, if you don't have the courage to fight against the Democratic establishment, it is going to spell defeat after defeat for ordinary people. So our job as the left is to hold leaders accountable everywhere.
And I think I have a question more of is like how parties work, and I guess how you see your party just actually working completely different than how the Republicans and Democrats operate. They're donor based. They have to just please a select few people, and then blanket marketing their campaigns and stuff like that. As far as reverse and like other like successful left politics where a political party is not so much political as far as like a social party where whether it is education, housing, healthcare, these are all extensions of more of a movement that has also wing in electoral politics and not necessarily a complete electoral political machine that just needs people to buy in, every 4 years. So yeah, could you talk about how you're more successful as building the party out as like a social movement and not necessarily just something where people just got to throw their ballot in?
I think that the way you frame that question is very useful because it allows us to think about how to use an elected office for the working class, for the labor movement, for ordinary people, for marginalized communities, and not look at it through this sort of, again, simplistic and somewhat sort of false dichotomous understanding of, well, you can either go the electoral route or you can go the movement route. To me, that simply does not explain the dynamic that exists on the ground in terms of the interests of the ruling class and big business and the rich versus the interests of ordinary people. How do you actually win victories? I think we have to understand that no matter what leadership position we win, that is going to be only as effective as the power of the rank and file, how democratic the movement is. So in other words, even if we win a city council office or a congressional office, at the end of the day, the idea of accountability can only come from being genuine for that office, being genuinely tied to social struggle, to social movements. And that is how we have done this. And in fact, the backbone of everything we have won, and also just everything that my office stands for, is not me individually, but me as part of course, our larger organization, Socialist Alternative, which is a nationwide organization of economic and social justice activists. And our organization being two things: one, being independent of the Democratic Party and not in any way beholden to the Democratic establishment's agenda, and also at the same time being genuinely tied to ordinary people, to working people as a whole, with our own members being mostly renters, very, very working class, many of them very young, and really as part of a larger sort of collective where we hold our elected leaders accountable to the members in Socialist Alternative, and Socialist Alternative as an organization is accountable to the larger interests of the working class. And so in that sense, what we have accomplished offers a small example of what could be possible if the left, if labor rank and file, if marginalized communities had our own political organization. And that is why you will often hear me talking about the need for a new party for the working class. It cannot work inside the Democratic Party. And I'll just say one other thing, how people say that, oh, well, if you run as an independent, it's going to be harder for you. If you're inside the Democratic Party, it'll be easier. Well, it's not easy inside the Democratic Party. In fact, it's utopian to think that you can do any kind of change within the Democratic Party.
So I want to bring in Angela Walker is here with us. Welcome, Angela.
Hey, I just had to clean up.
The house is very, very full. The house is extremely full today, and it's a beautiful fullness. Now, Angela, you had something you wanted to ask Councilwoman Sawant.
First off, Councilwoman, I'm completely fangirling here in South Carolina because I have followed your run and all the things that you've been doing for years. So I am extremely honored to even be in the same space as you. So I just wanted to say that. And also, as somebody, like I was listening to what you said earlier about how people disparage leftist candidates from running. Why are you running? Why you should aim for this? And why aren't you aiming for that? And why aren't you doing this? And I think one of the things that I have always wanted to know is, just how, and I've done it, but how do you see our ability as socialists to get people who are not necessarily socialists or consider themselves socialists to believe in what is possible? Because so many people are beaten down by everything that they've had to deal with, years before now. How do we get them to understand what's possible?
First of all, really nice to see you, Angela. I think that's also, in some ways, it's the idea that people might not be open to the ideas of socialism to some degree is a relic of the past, in the sense that, look at Bernie. I mean, we of course ran in Seattle, but Bernie Sanders, although obviously my definition of what it means to be a socialist is different slightly than Bernie Sanders, the fact is that he ran a presidential campaign as a self-described socialist. He never backed off from that term. And look at the reception he got from all over the country. I mean, you're in South Carolina. Look at the way his ideas of taxing Wall Street, of Medicare for all, of having a real working class agenda, of a political revolution against the billionaire class. Look at how it was welcomed by tens of millions of people in all kinds of states that are written off by the Democratic establishment. Oh, this is right wing. This is, this is a state that is beyond any redemption. And in reality, all of America really is full of working class people who may not all be on the same page on every single issue, but that's not the point. The point is they are hungry for the kind of social change that Bernie Sanders was talking about. But then we saw how, his agenda was very much, completely, fundamentally at odds with what the Democratic Party wants, what the Democratic leaders want. And that is why they pulled out every trick in the book to get him defeated. But it's not a defeat of those ideas. Those ideas are very much well received. And when we ran as a socialist in 2013, there were any number of conventional, political pundits and Democratic Party operatives, even, like progressives, who said, I want you to win, but do you have to start every speech by saying you're a socialist? Why don't you become a member of the Democratic Party? That way you'll get endorsements and so on and so forth. And we absolutely threw out that conventional rule book out the window, because we understood that win or lose, what's important is not this one seat. What's important is actually presenting an alternative to the hamster wheel of Republicans versus Democrat kind of politics. And in truth, Seattle does not have Republicans. I mean, this is a mythology. If anybody wants you to believe that somehow we are fighting Republicans, no, that's not true. This is a Democratic controlled city. And what we saw was that any number of people who consider themselves, I'm talking about ordinary people who think of themselves as Democratic Party members, they voted for us, and they have always voted for us. And it was on that basis that we have won 3 elections now as an open socialist. We didn't win that because they're all socialist or they think of themselves as socialists. They're very much Democratic Party members. But what they said was that you may be a socialist, but what you are fighting for is exactly what I want to see in Seattle.
Kshama, I want to ask you a question. You've alluded to that in some of your statements. I'd like you to give a broader analysis on, and I know you spoke favorably, but objectively about the Sanders campaign and the Sanders phenomenon and the DSA coterie as well. What exactly is your opinion of the Sanders entryism strategy into the Democratic Party and the focus on using the Democratic Party as a means to platform this progressive agenda? I know that your party is Socialist Alternative. Angela Walker was a VP for the Green Party. And you mentioned how you believe that the Democratic Party was a dead-end street. What is your overall opinion of this particular fascination with the Democratic Party we have with the squad or Democratic Party entryism as a DSA strategy? What are your thoughts on that broadly?
Well, first of all, I think it is important for us to note what a time we live in. This is not the Cold War era. I mean, we have seen tremendous growth like never before in our lifetimes in the Democratic Socialists of America. Socialist Alternative is a much smaller organization, but we've seen proportionate growth, and it really shows the incredible popularity of socialist ideas, of a fighting strategy among millions of people. There is an opening. So the worst mistake we could make is thinking that there isn't that opening or being stuck in the past. But at the same time, I mean, I think it's very clear. We have seen now with 2 Sanders runs as a Democratic Party candidate that the Democratic Party establishment will simply not allow a working class agenda. So I think the question of a new party for the working class absolutely is something that we have to put front and center. And I think in that debate, in the framework of the debate, we also have to challenge this idea that often comes up. And there are many people on the left in DSA who profess this idea that, well, we agree with you that the Democratic Party is a dead end. We agree with you that we need to build a new party. But in the here and now, it's just a pragmatic tactic for us to run in the Democratic Party ballot line because that will help us win. Well, that. First of all, let's understand that if you're running on the Democratic Party ballot line and telling yourself that, well, that's just a pragmatic tactic, but I'm not really in the Democratic Party, well, just dispel that, sort of self-deluding idea. It is running in the Democratic Party. This idea of a pragmatic tactic is really a refusal to turn the abstract idea of the need for a new party into something concrete that we need to fight for. And if you look at the trajectory of AOC and the squad, many of these aspects come to the surface. I mean, let's first recognize that it's not easy. I mean, we have to understand that even if we have disagreements and a debate with the squad members, and I certainly do, I'm not being coy about my disagreements, but the point is we have to recognize it's hard to take on the establishment, to take on the wrath of the Chuck Schumers and the Nancy Pelosi's. That's not easy. So it does take courage. It's important for us to recognize that. But it also shows the limitations of the strategy of being inside the Democratic Party. Look at what the Democratic Party did. I mean, AOC herself in a New York Times article in November after the election results talked about how she feels like she's being treated like the enemy inside the party. Well, there you go. She herself has summed up why, if she's actually wanting to fight for working people, she cannot be part of the Democratic Party. She took, she made donations to Democratic Party races, which I completely disagree with. But then what did those Democrats do? They disavowed that money, saying we don't want to be tainted by your left credentials. So in other words, the Democratic Party is sending a loud and clear message to us on the left that we don't want you, we don't want your agenda, we are hostile to your ideas, we're not going to lead on $15 an hour, we're not going to lead on Medicare for all. They are giving us the message, so we better take that message. Let's freaking take that message and understand that that's not going to work. And ultimately, it is about, obviously it's about building independent politics. But, it's also important to understand it's not about independent in name. Independent means independent of the agenda of the Democratic Party, and that has to show up everywhere you go. In other words, see the contrast between the valiant and successful teachers' strike in West Virginia, where the rank and file leaders of the teachers' unions defied the establishment-tied statewide and national leaders of the same union in order to keep the strike going, in order to keep unity among all the public school workers and win victories that the top leaders didn't think were possible and weren't maybe that interested in winning those kinds of victories. Compare that to what the National AFL-CIO has just done, where they have agreed to a New York legislation, which is actually union in name and actually a step backward for the union movement. So my point is that wherever you go, what it means to build independent politics is not a separation from the Democratic Party in name only, but in substance, fighting for a real working class agenda, which absolutely will mean conflict with people at the top wherever you go.
I wanted to ask you, to what extent do you see Hindu caste politics or types like that from diaspora, from different cultures from around the world, played a role in both grassroots organizing as well as at the Democratic Party level? And how do you manage to stay out of it, or how do you incorporate it in your organizing, and how do you make sure that it doesn't interfere with the priorities of working class politics?
I think this is a very important question, because it sort of relates to the need to build international working class solidarity. And so, and of course, we see these aspects entering the political debate inside the United States as well, because of significant populations of the South Asian community in many of our cities. And even there, what we see is, again, there is a whole section of young people who are looking for left politics. They are pushing, they not only marched in the Black Lives Matter movement, but they're also pushing back against the horrendous reactionary Hindu fundamentalist ideas put forward by Modi and the BJP regime. And they're bringing that fight to our shores. I mean, it's very important, for example, to note that there is a lawsuit right now in the California Supreme Court against a casteist discrimination inside the Cisco Corporation. This is inside the tech workers world, where tech workers of all castes, actually from the South Asian community, South Asian American immigrant community, are bringing this to light. This happens sort of invisibly inside corporations, and they've had the courage to bring it to the fore and explain to people that you can't be against oppression because and say, well, I march in Black Lives Matter movement, and then also be a Modi devotee and say that you prefer upper caste people, and then believe in ideas that are absolutely destructive to not only the lower caste community in India, but also poor people in general, and not to mention the migrant community. So in other words, what young people are recognizing is that you cannot have the mantle, you cannot wear the mantle of a fighter against oppression unless you understand that capitalism is a global system, and that fighting oppression and fighting for, fighting to end worker exploitation, by definition, has to be an internationalist fight. And we have used our office in that way also. For example, in the January of last year, we had a whole movement here in Seattle against Modi's reactionary, anti-Muslim, anti-Dalit, anti-poor new so-called citizenship laws. And when we brought a resolution forward to the city council, there was a complete uproar from as I said, there are 8 Democrats on this council. I'm one socialist. And there was an absolute uproar ranging all the way from, well, what does this have to do with city agenda, to which, of course, is completely absurd. Of course, these are international issues, and we have a South Asian community in Seattle, so of course it matters. But also, ranging from there to saying, well, we can't take a fight with Modi. We've just got a letter from Modi's Indian consulate in San Francisco saying that we are misinformed. What if you are misinforming me? I mean, the council members, Democrats, actually said that to me. What if you're misinforming us and that's just your view? And so we were able to fight back against it, but only because absolutely hundreds of people mobilized. And it wasn't only Indians, it was people who have emigrated from Pakistan, from Middle East. Everybody stood together and understood that we have to fight back against it. Similarly, just weeks ago, we won a resolution on the city council demanding that Biden not be an obstacle to the WTO, removing the WTO patent restrictions on vaccines being able to produce generically in countries like India and South Africa to potentially save millions of lives. So all of this shows concretely how we can actually bring an international agenda and tie it to local politics.
Councilwoman, how are we on time with you? Are we still good with time with you?
Probably like 5-10 minutes, and then I have to go.
Okay. Pascal, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I had a question about the way in which particularly the Black political class that is wedded to the Democratic Party in the 2016 and 2020 election was used to pivot the Black electorate, particularly in the South Carolina primary, to Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and neutralize the Sanders primary. Exactly. Now, I understand in places like Seattle, where there's not a large Black population, that may not be a factor. But what exactly are the steps that the left has to take or is not taking in effectively penetrating the infrastructure of the Black political class to try to necessitate the presence of Black working class people in a left politics that benefits them? And why isn't there more strategic attempt by this new coterie of the left to penetrate that infrastructure to include large segments of the Black community in that type of politics? In my opinion, you may disagree if that's the case, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Sorry, can you just say what do you think I might disagree with? Can you just?
You might disagree that phenomenon is the case, that there's a lack of effort or a lack of ability. But I'd like to know what your thoughts on in terms of my overall question.
First of all, I mean, we have to recognize what a shameful action that was with Congress members like James Clyburn, especially using his political clout to, as you said correctly, neutralize the Black, working class demand for the kind of program that Bernie Sanders was running, and to essentially hand over the election to Joe Biden on a gold platter. And it really shows you the limitations, and these could be, it could be fatal to the left for our movements, let alone for any, systemic change away from capitalism. If we did not understand the absolute pitfalls of that kind of identity politics, where you say, well, James Clyburn is Black, so we have to follow Black leaders, and we see that often, and we see this, and it's nothing unique to what's happening inside the Black leadership. It's also something you observe in India, for example, my home country, Karthik's home country, where what's happening really is that worldwide, including in the United States, but this is absolutely at this moment a historic international phenomenon, that hundreds of millions of people, young people especially, are understanding that this system is not working for us. There is anger against the rich. There is anger against bourgeois politics. There is a real search for alternatives. And so when historically, we can see that whenever the forces of social change, of let alone, revolts and revolutionary movements start coming up to the fore, you will see those counter forces also being developed, because the ruling class and the forces of capitalism have to defend themselves, and they will come up with not only specific fight back for their own interests, for example, like the recall that we're facing here, which is a concrete fight that they are carrying out against socialist politics, but it will also come in the form of a systematic and ferocious ideological offensive against working class solidarity. And so if the left does not only watch out for this, but actually present a real analysis that allows working class people to unite, not on the basis of brushing aside the questions of specific oppression, but precisely on the basis of explaining that the fight against oppression is related to the fight for working class people, for working class gains as a whole. Unless we make that connection and not only make it concrete in analysis, but show it, demonstrate in action, we are going to face setback after setback. And that's why, just to give you a concrete example, even in Seattle, we have that debate ongoing, and we cannot shy away from that debate. Just to give you one example, and if I have time, I'll give you other examples. It's a very crucial, this is a good part of the debate, which is that when we were fighting for the Amazon tax, we had begun fighting for the Amazon tax. We had launched the Tax Amazon movement as part of my third term inauguration in January of last year. And then Black Lives Matter broke out in May. And we absolutely wanted to take the Tax Amazon movement to the protests. And we had pushback from some BLM leaders. They didn't say this very openly, but in some cases they did. But there was this whole idea that, well, the Amazon tax is not a Black Lives Matter issue. That is just your social agenda. Can we focus on Black issues? Well, we disagreed. And we said that, look, we don't agree with you. We're happy to conduct an honest debate, but we don't buy into this idea that, the movement can decide its path forward on the basis of whether you follow this gatekeeper or that gatekeeper. We don't agree with gatekeeping on political ideas, period. And we will take this idea to the people themselves, to the protest themselves, and ordinary people the working people can decide for themselves whether this is a Black Lives Matter issue or not. And the response we got, Pascal, was stunning. I mean, we had the Tax Amazon ballot initiative, and the strength of the ballot initiative was going to decide whether we won it on the city council or not. So in other words, it was not a legislative process, all that nonsense. It was the city council and big business having to concede, being forced to concede to actually pass the Amazon tax as a city council ordinance, because they were afraid of this credible threat we created with collecting 30,000 signatures for the Tax Amazon ballot initiative during the midst, the thick of the Black Lives Matter movement. And the reception we got for the Amazon tax among Black working class people who were out there in the protest, braving tear gas and rubber bullets, was just unbelievable. We collected the signatures at the rate of 1,000 a day, and of those 30,000, 20,000 of them were collected at the protest themselves. So in other words, Black working class people spoke loud and clear, the Amazon tax is a BLM issue. So it shows you how inside, obviously we need courage for the left to fight against the ruling class and the democratic establishment, but there also has to be courage inside the movement to fight for what we believe are the correct ideas and build democratically organized movements, which the Tax Amazon movement was, by empowering, we empowered thousands of people to come to Tax Amazon action conferences where ordinary people discussed, debated, and voted on the principal elements of the ballot initiative, our strategies, and our tactics.
Now, hopefully we got some time, but I had a question about kind of like the process and going into like.
Do we have time for one more question, Councilwoman?
Yes, one more.
Okay. Going in, like, it's talking about pragmatism. And I people say, oh, it's pragmatic to go in the Democratic Party, but obviously you're not demanding that, Seattle give the means of production to the workers, right? There's no socialism or communism bill. You have to go through these things smartly and say, hey, what are the things that we can win, right? Like the Amazon tax, and so working towards some of the efforts, solving, homelessness crisis and everything like that. So I guess, how do you go about finding the fights that you're going to go ahead and push forward?
I think it's very, very important to have the approach. I think what Socialist Alternative has done, not just in Seattle, but in our interventions, for example, in the Stop and Shop strike action in Boston, our interventions alongside the workers who were attempting to unionize, which was a courageous effort in Bessemer, Alabama, and building that struggle going forward. Everywhere we have an approach where we are, we are very much connected to the demands on the ground, and we have conversations with ordinary people, with working class people, with people in, members in the labor movement, and understand where people's ideas are. But attempt to build a strategy to win those concrete victories, and which is the whole reason, for example, that in 2013 we adopted the $15 minimum wage. It's not something that we invented as a demand. It was clear that the working class, especially in the fast food sector, was starting to be, that was starting to capture their imagination, and that there was a real willingness to fight on $15 an hour. And so the work we do is very much, it's not just the tactics that you see out front. Those tactics are a result of a serious approach towards developing our analysis and perspectives, understanding what the political lay of the land is and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Obviously, there's an element of prediction in this, and we don't claim to be infallible. But the point is, having that serious analytical approach is absolutely crucial for any serious movement on the left. You can't win victories without that. And as part of that approach of seriousness in politics, we also have what we do is not only fight on those concrete battles, but we talk about what is needed ultimately as well. So you mentioned means of production. Obviously, we are this is real life. We know the movement is not at that point, but that doesn't mean you dissociate your political analysis from that in any way, because again, we're not fighting just for reforms because we know the reforms will be taken away from us. We know capitalism is a dead end. It's not just the Democratic Party that's a dead end. And so we do need to build the forces of socialism. But how you do that is by winning concrete victories, and more than the victories themselves, the struggle, the fighting strategies that we're able to win. That's what we are spreading more than anything else, because it's the feeling of self-confidence, the shedding of the shackles of fear, and really understanding that we can do this in this way. Like, or in other words, specifically building a fighting strategy can actually work. Those lessons are crucial. But in addition to those lessons, it's also the question of socialism itself. So just to give you one concrete example, in 2013, 3 days after our election was certified, there was a movement in Seattle, really in a defensive way, unfortunately, because the Democratic state legislature had already given an extortionary handout to the Boeing executives and the billionaire class by giving them a nearly $9 billion corporate tax handout, which also in the process sold out Boeing machinists, selling out their pension programs and so on. And the Boeing workers were angry. And at that rally, when I spoke, I obviously spoke in solidarity with the machinists, completely condemned the shameful actions of the Democrats in the state. But also I said that, look, if the Democratic Party and if the Boeing Corporation will continue to do this, and this won't be the last time, then we have to raise the question of workers in the community taking Boeing into democratic public ownership and retooling it for public transit and other socially beneficial ideas. And at that time, many of the workers were not ready for that, and they felt that this was something that they were uncomfortable with. But since then, many of the workers have actually come up to me and said, actually, you know what, years later, I recognize that is a question that needs to be confronted. Similarly, in the struggles that we're involved with Amazon, we don't just talk about how to win the Amazon tax, which we absolutely do, how to win unionizing struggles, which we absolutely do. But we also talk about how winning any of this will be hard enough, but it won't be sufficient. We have to talk about taking Amazon, $1 trillion corporation, into democratic public ownership to be run by workers, for workers. And certainly this question is absolutely prominent related to the questions of climate crisis. The capitalism is not going to solve the climate crisis. That it has proven that. And so we do need to take fossil fuel corporations and the big banks into democratic public ownership to go towards clean, renewable energy.
Well, Councilwoman, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. We truly appreciate it. Karthik, thanks again for hooking that one up.
Anytime, man.
Truly appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck. And is there anything we can do to help support to stop this recall on our end here? I'm in California, Pascal's in Miami, Angela's in South Carolina, Marcus is in Maine, but we'd all like to help keep you in office. So is there anything we can do and the people watching and listening can do?
First of all, thank you all so much. I'm so grateful for you all, not only this conversation, which has been absolutely delightful, but also for covering the recall campaign against us. As I said before, we need the solidarity of everybody on the left. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Miami or in Seattle. And I would really urge you all to check out socialistalternative.org, of course, which is the website of my organization, but also kshamasolidarity.org, which is the campaign, our solidarity campaign against the recall. The website is KSHAMA, my first name, solidarity, all one word, .org. Please find out more about the recall campaign. If any of you who are watching this, you are able to come to Seattle and volunteer for our campaign for a few months, we would absolutely welcome that. But if you're not able to do that, we still need your help. Please make donations. Obviously, the billionaires are not donating to our solidarity campaign. They're donating to the recall. So we absolutely need financial solidarity. And also, if there are leaders in the cities where you live, left leaders, labor leaders, social movement leaders who would like to publicly support our campaign with a statement of endorsement, we really want that and we welcome that.
Well, you guys heard it here. I'm going to put links up to your organization in where all the places where the chat or where the show is playing. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great rest of your day and a good weekend. Thank you.
Wish you all a very good weekend as well. Thank you so much.
You too as well.
Peace.